where only those with proximity to power and the advantage unduly given to them by the spaces they occupy, either in public or private institutions, Mr. Speaker, are able to enjoy living in the country. And we are being asked to repair and fix it. Where this thing has reached, Mr. Speaker, it needs an overhaul. I am afraid that not the usual glue and gum that we put into areas that are leaking will solve this time. It's completely broken. If it's a pipeline, Mr. Speaker, it is time to decommission and set up a new pipeline. That's what I hear as being challenged. We are being told that everybody wants a fair shot at life, and not our children to get better chances at education. Better chances, Mr. Speaker. I grew through our public education systems, from primary to secondary to university, Mr. Speaker. And it was the best at that particular time. People are complaining, Mr. Speaker, that unfortunately, as it is today, nobody with a pen in this country take their children either to public, primary, secondary, or even university, because it's completely finished, Mr. Speaker. The picture of the primary schools that you all went to, Mr. Speaker, while it served and it worked at that particular time, public education is broken at this time. And we must make radical decision, because, Mr. Speaker, that's what they are speaking to. And they are saying, while you guys are okay, what about the kid of the ordinary person? You know, Mr. Speaker, when every time I lost sleep, as I thought through about the issues that we've been through as a country, Mr. Speaker, I asked myself, where is it that we as leaders have lost touch with reality? I didn't grow up as a child of privilege, Mr. Speaker, for your information. I am 38 years old. I came to this parliament at the age of 29. The first 29 years of my life, I spent them in Eastlands, deep in the slums. I have sold sim, like these kids you see on our streets in Ngong Road as you drive, Mr. Speaker, and many times when I see them, I reflect back and I roll down my windows and I share with them, because I know that they are complementing what their parents are doing. That's what sends these kids out to the streets. I know what it feels, Mr. Speaker. But why is it that when granted such an opportunity, we are not able to make it better? I believe that an opportunity to serve, Mr. Speaker, and this is what I hear us being told as the leaders, an opportunity to serve is to be reminded that we have issues, but we have looked at you and we think you have the wisdom and the ability to make it work for all of us. Can you go and serve? Go and make it possible for the rest of us to enjoy. But unfortunately, either by design or because that is what the country is accustomed to, Mr. Speaker, when you get the first line at the queue, we don't think about the second and the third onwards, Mr. Speaker. We are satisfied that so long as I've had my serving at the table, that will be enough. That's what people are complaining about, Mr. Speaker. And we are here to plead this morning that grant us the opportunity to lead the country as the Senate of Kenya in making the right and the correct decision, so that we don't lose our country. I say this at this particular time, Mr. Speaker, so that people may know that in whatever we say, in whatever we do, anarchy is not an option. I'd wish to plead even to those that are leading these protests and demonstrations, that if Kenya was to sink, unfortunately, not even them will be spared, Mr. Speaker. And I like the fact that many of the people have begun speaking out and saying that there are certain conditions that you must meet even as a person in some of the solutions that you are prescribing. Because you listen to what is being said in the online spaces, Mr. Speaker, some of the solutions that you can clearly see this will get us into more problems than already we are being unfortunately prescribed on us by people who are not within the borders of Kenya. And that's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker. But like I have said, it's not time to apportion blame and point fingers. It is time to lead the country and point them to the right direction. Because what our young people have done is that they have spectacularly, perhaps painted better than Galileo could ever paint, Mr. Speaker, a picture perfect of the reality of what it means to live in the Republic of Kenya today. Nobody could have done it any better, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it's our duty. We are duty-bound as an institution to lead. Mr. Speaker, corruption has featured prominently in this conversation. In fact, at the heart of it, perhaps finance bill was just but a trigger. But the bigger conversation that the country is having is on the issue of corruption. And what is it that we need to do? We passed a new constitution in 2010, Mr. Speaker, and we thought at that particular time that we had finally succeeded to slay the dragon of corruption, because this is a challenge that as a country we've dealt with the last 60 years or 50, Mr. Speaker. But the question that people are saying is that instead of actually getting better, despite the fact that we have created independent offices, Mr. Speaker, it has become worse. EACC has crafted, and that's a conversation that we will need to have as a House. And eventually, Mr. Speaker, something that we haven't resolved at this point is when we have the thematic areas, shall we resolve them as a committee of the whole? There's a big thinking that says, given the national importance of this conversation, we cannot even relegate it to the committees. There are those that hold a slightly different view, and we will take time to reflect, and I am willing to be persuaded as I listen to my colleagues when they'll be speaking on this issue, Mr. Speaker, whether we deal with it as a committee of the whole. Because we must invite EACC here, Mr. Speaker. And they must tell us, Mr. Speaker, why is it that we are not succeeding? Is it the law? What is it, Mr. Speaker? What do we need to do as a country? Because what we know for sure is that the system has set up, even this design in our counties, Mr. Speaker, of saying you have an ethics and anti-corruption officer at every county, Mr. Speaker. Basically, what it takes is that they are quickly captured, Mr. Speaker, and they become appendages of the corrupt system in our various counties, Mr. Speaker. The same can be said nationally. And this issue, Mr. Speaker, if we are to be honest, and I wish that the country also indulges us, is that corruption is not only a problem of leaders. It's a national problem. It's a values problem that we have as a people. We cannot just speak, Mr. Speaker, about what leaders are doing without taking time to consider and say, how do we demonetize our politics, Mr. Speaker? How do we make politics less influenced and infiltrated by the power of money, Mr. Speaker? Because unless and until a country has that conversation, Mr. Speaker, I am afraid we are not likely to win this conversation. And part of the proposal that must come out of here, Mr. Speaker, is the process of removing money out of our politics, Mr. Speaker. That has destroyed the fabric of our society. And I like the fact that listening to the president the other day, he said, and this is something that, a conversation that many of us have had many times, that even this issue of Harambee is the way it's being done, Mr. Speaker, this presentation of resources, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps it's time to ban it from us as public officials, so that when I go before people, I tell them about policies that I have made to make their life better, not the 2 million shillings that I'm carrying in my car to give them to build a classroom for them, Mr. Speaker. That's a challenge that we must be willing to accept. Because, Mr. Speaker, until, and I must repeat, until we demonetize our politics, Mr. Speaker, and the space of influence, it will continue to be a gold rush and the desire, Mr. Speaker, on every member. You know, people don't know that the cycle of and the life of a politician in this country, it involves running Monday to Thursday, collecting as much as you can, only to go and spend it on Friday to Sunday. And in fact, most of that money, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't even get to the houses of these members. People don't know. If a member makes perhaps $1 million within a week, they'll be very lucky if 100,000 makes it to do anything in their house. 900 of that money goes back to the constituency. Therefore, we must remove that demand. And this desire to see members of parliament and politicians and people who are in public offices, Mr. Speaker, as if they are tools for pushing resources and money. Until we do that, but that's just the effects. What we need to address here today is a structural fight, and those that are in the justice and Mr. Speaker, law and order society, that they must come here and we must reveal to each other and tell each other, why is it difficult? EACC must appear before us, Mr. Speaker, and they must tell us this is what we need to do. so that we know, Mr. Speaker, why is it we are now in the third cycle of county governments, Mr. Speaker? Everybody knows why people can almost kill each other to be county governors, Mr. Speaker. But we don't have a solid case, not one, before any courts of law that can point out and say, this is what we have done as an institution, so that people know this is what we are doing. We will be willing, Mr. Speaker, because this has featured prominently. We are being even challenged, Mr. Speaker, as an institution on the things that we have done and said and the laws that we have passed. We must make it difficult. It must pain people, Mr. Speaker, to break the system after we repair it. The punishment must be punitive, Mr. Speaker, so that it gets to a point where people fear. You know, people don't fear to be corrupt in this country because they know what is the worst that will happen. I will be taken to court, I will pay a bail, and I will walk scot-free. Chances are I'll enjoy that money until I die. EACC must come to us, Mr. Speaker, and tell us even this new jurisprudence that they are trying to establish, where somebody steals $1 billion, then says, I am willing to part with 300 million, and we remove the case. Unless we didn't read properly. But good leaders have said, this is not the time to apportion blame. If there are things that they want us to change, is it their budget? Is it the law as we defined it, Mr. Speaker? Let us listen with an open mind and say, tell us what it is that will respond to this particular issue. Mr. Speaker,